Hello, my name's Priya Tew and it is such an honour to have been asked to give the Elsie Widdowson Lecture this year. I'll be honest, it's not something that I saw coming at all, and when I got the letter I was pretty much dumbfounded and didn't have any words, which for me is really unusual. So yeah, incredible honour to be asked to give this lecture for the profession. So thank you very much to the British Dietetic Association for asking me. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Priya. I'm a dietitian. I've been qualified since 2005 and I trained in Cardiff. I then couldn't get a job, so I was one of those dietitians who got their masters. I already had a degree in nutritional sciences as well, and then there were not enough jobs around. So I took an admin role, and I also trained as a fitness instructor on the side. And I thought, well, if there aren't any jobs around, I'll start doing some freelance work. And having come from a family where both of my parents were self-employed, I felt like I had a little bit of a grounding into what that meant. It turns out I really didn't, and running your own business is a lot harder than I ever knew. But I have therefore been doing some freelance work since 2005, and I was fortunate enough to have another dietitian come alongside me to give me some mentoring, to help me with some work, and she has been such a huge support to me over the years. So one of my top tips would be, if you're starting out, try and find somebody else who will mentor you and come alongside you. So then we fast forward, and I did actually get an NHS role, and I ended up with an eating disorder post. And when I went into that job again, I didn't really have much of an idea as to what that would be like. There hadn't been a dietitian in the team for a couple of years, so I got to build that department back up again. And that's where my love of eating disorders comes from. So most of my clinical work is eating disorders. Very quickly, I found as a dietitian that the profession was very small in terms of the number of dietitians, in terms of the networking, but also in terms of the vision and the outlook. And that's always been something that I've wanted to try and change. So that is where my media interest has come from. So at quite a young point in my career, I had a friend who worked for one of the television companies, and he said to me, "You would be great on camera. I think you would be great as a presenter." And he's somebody who's really encouraged me over the years and still does. In fact, his daughter has now become a dietitian too, and she does a bit of work with me, which is amazing. So you never know where all of your connections are going to go to, do you? I'm also known for my role on social media, I guess. So I fell into social media after having my first baby, being at home quite a lot back in 2010. And there I met a wonderful group of dietitians, and we formed our own little virtual department. And that's where the freelance world really started to open up for me. So thinking about our role model, I really wanted to kind of start this talk thinking about Elsie Widdowson. Now, when I've done a bit of reading about her, what's really highlighted to me has been the fact that she's a radical feminist. She was an amazing woman by the sounds of things, the type of person I'd love to have round to dinner. She was the type of dietitian that saw a problem and then set out to fix it, even if that meant that she had to use herself as the experiment. As a keen researcher, a lot of her work was really foundational and brought about change. For example, she did some work on infant milks, and this led to revisions in the milks, which were still in place in the 1980s. In World War II, with rationing in place, she went on a really restrictive diet and then used rigorous exercise and ate the allowed rations to see whether the rations were actually enough for health. So rather than using other people to experiment on, she used herself. So it just shows what an amazing pioneer she was. She also did a lot of work studying the nutritional values of foods and comparing them before and after cooking, and that led to one of our nutrition Bibles today, McCants and Widdowson. Sadly, Elsie is no longer with us, but she's certainly someone who I would love to have a conversation with to hear her views on where the profession should be going now. So when we think about dietitians and our role, I would say that our profession is one that has been overlooked and undervalued for years, perhaps since the very start. There is a huge amount of confusion about what we actually do and the differences between a dietitian, a nutritionist, a registered nutritionist, a nutritional therapist, a personal trainer who's got some kind of nutrition qualification. And I think that really needs some clarity. And even ourselves as dietitians, do we know the differences between all of these different roles? And do we have an idea as to where we fit within the healthcare system? Because if we don't know who we are ourselves and what our great selling points are as a profession, then how are we going to tell that to other people? I'm really passionate about our profession. I think we do amazing things and we could have an amazing future, but if we are not working on that ourselves individually and as a team, then we could get overlooked and squashed out. And that would be really sad. So what makes us different to other nutrition professionals? I would say it's our knowledge of complex medical conditions and how nutrition plays a role. We're evidence-based and we're critical thinkers, and we have an ability to work as part of a team, but also individually. But what do other people say when you tell them that you're a dietitian? Is it, what's the best diet? Because that's generally what I hear, and that's where we need to have a change. So as dietitians, we're trained in the nutritional management of disease. We use the evidence base effectively. We translate complex science into health messages that people can understand. But more than that, we're not those people in white coats all the time walking around the hospital. We're people with compassion and empathy who really care about the health of the people we work with. And I think that is also a really key thing to highlight. You know, our profession is built on care. We aren't trained in business. We aren't trained in social media, in marketing and advertising. But we are by nature a group of people who really care and are kind to each other. And these are things that set us apart. But back to that idea of that training in business and social media and marketing and advertising, these are certainly things that I also think we need to focus on. And personally, I wish that I'd been taught those as part of my dietetic training. In the current culture we live in, dietitians need to be on the cutting edge, or we're going to get cut out. Our messages need to be pushed forward, and as people, we need to be seen. Because right now, social media wants to see who the person is. They don't want to just see the meme and the message. They want to see, who are you? And if we're not doing this, then it leaves the gap for lesser qualified or unqualified people to take the helm. We've already seen examples of this happening. So my main clinical specialty is eating disorders. And many of the clients I work with will tell me how much of an influence social media has on their food beliefs, and it's the place that they go to seek out nutritional information. And they are looking at celebrities and influencers who do not have adequate training but are giving out nutrition information. We can't change the current culture, but we can aim to stay current. So what we're not taught at university. Now, I adored my time at uni, and the constant learning and the growing is something that as dietitians, we do. Uni equips us for going into a hospital or a clinical setting, but it doesn't necessarily equip us for going into other settings or even tell us what those settings could be. So some of the things that I would love to see being put into dietetics training are things like a business module, thinking about email marketing, building websites, social media, how to advertise yourself. Also the other vast areas that dietitians can work in. So things like working in industry, working with brands, working with the media, working with social media, in sports, in private case management, with food companies, in education and care homes, in academia. It's really endless as to the areas that we can work in. There seems to be a notion that our profession is not yet complete and that there is more to come and there is more to develop. And that means that we need to be encouraging those who are newly qualified to do that. We need to be constantly pushing and encouraging and supporting and mentoring others. And I think that's also part of our role. And yes, it does take time and it does take energy, but from my own personal experience, I would not be where I was today if it wasn't for some other dietitians coming alongside me and really saying to me, you can do this, and this is how, and can I help you? So I'd really love to see a more rounded approach to dietetics training and seeing more dietitians coming alongside each other and supporting each other. So onto my media work. I guess my media work is something that I'm known for, so specifically my role on Eat Well for Less. How did I get into the media is a question I am asked quite a lot. To be honest, I'm not too sure, is usually my answer. But when I think a little bit harder, I did go for a heck of a lot of auditions, and I had a friend who pushed me pretty hard and said, you can do this. I had the luxury, before I had children, of being able to travel quite a lot and going for calls and getting experience as to how to be on camera. And I think that really gave me a great grounding. How did I get my role on Eat Well for Less? That all really happened because I was seen on social media and because I had videos up there. So I already had some background information that people could look at and see what type of person I was. So if you're interested in that type of role, then you need to have something there showcasing you. However, although media work looks very glamorous, it really isn't. So my role in Eat Well for Less, there's nobody doing hair, makeup, clothes, anything like that. It's very fast paced, it's very long hours. So it's something that you have to really be passionate about if you're going to do it. It's also not incredibly well paid. So if you are interested in media work, I would certainly encourage you to go for it, but it's really not for everyone. Having said that, I'd love to see more dietitians doing it because we want to make sure dietitians are getting those roles, and we want the right nutrition messages getting across. I would say if you are approached for media work, to always think really carefully about the messages that you want to get across and do those work with the show. So you may have to turn down roles because they're not suitable or they're not scientifically accurate or they're not giving the right message out to the public. Always have your key messages ready and do your research. So I will spend quite a long time researching what I want to say before I say it. But also at the same time, TV is all about being inventive and creative, so coming up with ideas and approaching the team with things. Social media is the other thing that I end up doing quite a lot of and spending a lot of my time on. Social media, I think, is a real opportunity for us as healthcare professionals to be, again, showing what we do and showing why our role is important. It also gives us a space, and a space that we can own ourselves. It's a great opportunity to advertise yourself, which can feel odd to start with because we're not trained in doing that. But it's important. If we are not advertising ourselves and showing what we do, then we're not going to be getting the work, which means somebody lesser qualified could be getting that work. It's also a place to show what dietitians actually do, even if that seems boring. So people are fascinated by the little snippets of our day. And it's often the things that you think won't get much attention that do. So things like Instagram stories are huge for that. It's a place where we can shout out key nutrition messages of our own, but also we can amplify the voices of other people. So I love to share other people's messages because that means that their message is getting further, but also as a profession, the messages are just getting out there. So definitely sharing other people's information is really important. It's a place where we can explain our own specialty. So I will share lots of things about eating disorders or about my clinics. If I've been working in IBS, for example, then I might share some things from my day. And again, people are really interested in that. But also we need to remember that we can't give individual advice over social media. So obviously we've got to be quite careful about what we do share and saying that one size does not fit all in terms of nutrition. If you are a specialist in a certain area, then a great way to get onto social media is to ask to guest post for somebody else. So could you approach someone else and say, this is my area that I work in, I notice it's not an area you're a specialist in, I'd love to do you a post. And that can be a way to just dip your toe in the water and see what it's like. If you are on social media, and hopefully you all are, if not, get in touch later, let's get that sorted, then network as much as you can. There are so many incredible people on social media. I learn stuff every day from other dietitians and other healthcare professionals and doctors who are sharing incredible things. So they're sharing research, they might be sharing projects that they're working on, they're sharing from their clinical practice, and we can be learning from each other and seeing it as a form of CPD. Really be yourself. So one thing I think social media can challenge is the fact that we want it to be perfect, or we want it to look a certain way. My view on that is, yes, that can work, but we also need to be real with people, show them the reality of how we work, maybe a bit about how we eat, how we are as a person, because we want to be approachable. We want people to see that we are real life human beings rather than just a screen. So be prepared to share a bit about yourself, and also be prepared to try new things and look a bit silly. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I've been experimenting over the last couple of weeks with Instagram Reels. It's completely out of my comfort zone. I feel very old, but it's working. So I think we have to be prepared to move with the times and try these things out. So why do we all need to be on social media? I'm really passionate that we do. I think we do need to all be on social media. We do need to, even if you're watching and retweeting or sharing other people's messages and not putting your own out there, that's still really valuable. The more dietitians we have on social media, the more voices there are sharing common sense, evidence-based nutrition messages. People are on social media looking for that information, and if we're not sharing it, then goodness knows what else they're going to be finding. If as a profession we want to advance and be current, we need to be where the people are. And we know at the minute that around 3.5 billion people, that's around 45% of the world's population, are using social media every day for an average of 3 hours a day. So 49% of consumers will look to an influencer for advice and recommendations. Now, I don't really like the term influencer. It's certainly not something that I set out to be. But I think also that we do need to have people in our field working in that role as influencers. In fact, we all need to be up there being influencers, because if we're not doing it, then there's going to be potentially a public health crisis coming with all of this dodgy nutritional information going out there. Social media takes time, and at times it certainly feels pointless, but I think it is worthwhile doing. So as I said, even resharing other people's information is a great place to be starting. Find other like-minded dietitians and communicate with them. So I have made some of my closest nutrition friends now via social media, and those are people who I will go to for advice. I'll get them to read over my stuff, I'll get them to share their expertise, so it's like my own little department going on over social media. So you never know who you might meet on there. Now, the don'ts of social media, there's obviously things that we want to not be doing. So obviously we have to maintain confidentiality at all times, that's a given. And we can't give out individual nutrition advice. So if someone approaches you saying, I've got X, Y, and Z, what should I do? Then we need to be really careful about what type of advice we're giving. And for somebody like me who's a freelancer, then, obviously saying you probably need a consultation. And I love referring on to other people. So if it's something that an area that I don't work in, then, always passing that on. But it's also key to highlight to others that individual advice is really important. So, sometimes actually sharing across a channel, so-and-so has asked me this question, actually I can't give you the individual advice, because that wouldn't be safe. I need your full medical history, and this is how dietitians work. You know, we don't just give out random bits of advice. Now, with social media, there can be a real pressure to feel that you have to post all the time, which isn't the key. It's certainly something that I thought you had to do initially, but it's not all about the numbers. It's more about credibility and us being professional and building a following of trust. So don't worry about feeling you need to post all the time and it being time consuming always. Instead, I would say choose times when you're going to post and stick to those. And people who are following you will pick up as to what type of person you are and when you're posting. Sharing about your life is important. It's important to show that we're real, but also not oversharing. So always checking that anybody else in your photos is happy. Unfortunately, if you're one of my friends, you'll probably end up on my Instagram stories. So do let me know if you're not happy. And don't only share the good bits about life. So I love to share the reality of my life. I'm a single mum. My house is normally chaos. I have children running around being noisy. I have kitchen disasters, and I have real life meals where it looks like a slop on a plate. Share it. I think it's really important that we don't just show the picture perfect moments. The sad part about social media for me is the bullying that goes on and the trolls. And I would say, you know, straight away block and mute as needed. Starting an argument on social media is obviously a public forum, everybody can see that. So either slide into the DMs or make sure that you block and you mute or you just ignore. So there's a lot of nastiness. It's actually one of the reasons I've come off Twitter lately. But there are plenty of other dietitians around who will support you. So if you see somebody else being bullied or someone being unkind, then do always send them a message and just see if you can help, or whether they just need you to know that you've got their back and that you've seen it. Because as a profession, we're small, we need to be looking after one another, making sure that everyone is kept safe. Imposter syndrome is the next thing I wanted to cover. I think a lot of us struggle with this, including myself. Hence, we need this team approach. I need other dietitians behind me saying, you can do this, you've got this, you're good at this, because otherwise I'm not going to do it. That's where getting into a friendly group of people can really help. That might be your department, but it could be that actually you need to form another department, this kind of virtual department where you've got like-minded people who are coming alongside you and supporting you. I've met a really great number of dietitians on my time on social media, and what I love is that I don't have to chat to them all the time. I can just dip in and out as I need them and ask them questions and support them, and they support me. There's also amazing training going on over social media, which is great and that we can take part in, and that means that we can continue to be amazing sources of knowledge, but also we can continue to be humble with it. So one of the things I think about being a dietitian that I've seen over the years is the humble nature of the dietitian. So we never quite think we're good enough, or that we know enough, or we've done enough training on something, which is great because it makes us keep on learning, and that is a key thing. But also we need to appreciate the fact that we've got a lot of knowledge in our heads and at our fingertips, or we can find that knowledge and ask for it and look it up, and that does make us an expert in our field. So why am I on social media? I get a lot out of it from a selfish perspective. So I get to advertise myself, and I do get work through social media. I get to connect to what other people are doing. So I get to see what other dietitians are doing, and I can learn from that, or I can just go, oh, look at that, that's really fascinating, and ask them more questions about it. Because I'm not in the field of research and I don't work in a hospital environment, it means I can stay up to date with those types of things as well. So I can see the current research that's coming out in different areas and I can read it. So I love the people who tweet the research. Keep that going, guys. It's really helpful for me. I love seeing the current trends. So social media is also a place to see what foods people are into, you know, what the latest fad diet is, all of those types of things, which then shows us where we need to be putting some more of our time and effort. And it's also a place to shout out when you need help. So putting a shout out if you're working on a project or if you need some extra information. So those are some of the reasons why I'm on social media. Now, back to this idea of being an influencer, which is something I still struggle with. I wouldn't say I'm an influencer at all. I do get called it. I don't think I am. I'd say I'm just a dietitian and a mum, to be honest. But being a dietitian is an honour. And if that means that we need to call ourselves certain terms in order to look okay on social media and to get noticed more so that we're getting these important messages out, then so be it. Now, I recently went through an Hcpc inquiry after a complaint was made against me. And the complaint was made by a journalist in relation to me working with brands on social media. So you can imagine that this was a terrifying ordeal, and this happened at the start of lockdown. So this process has gone on through lockdown, has potentially been slowed up because of lockdown, and perhaps there's not been as much support around due to that as well. And I think this shows why there can be fear about what we do and what we post on social media. However, I've come out the other end of this now, and it was thrown out and I was told that I've done nothing wrong. And I think the real positive that's come from this is that I've heard from the Hcpc and from the BDA that working with brands on social media is something we should be doing. Now, obviously we need accountability in this, and that's why we have the Hcpc, and that is important. And as stressful as the process was of going through that inquiry, it's really made me look at what I do and be completely thankful for my job and for my profession. And I can tell you hand on heart that I am so thankful that I'm a member of the BDA and that I have been paying my fees, because it has been invaluable this year. So thank you to the legal team for getting me through that. But being an influencer isn't what it's all about. I would say it's about being credible, and it's about being professional, and it's knowing where our boundaries are. So when we think about the contentious subject of advertising, I think this is something we need to be talking about, because it's becoming more and more prevalent. And I know some people think that as healthcare professionals we should not be doing adverts. However, have we not been doing this for years in a different way? So we've been working with brands and supporting them and writing information for them, and maybe doing PR quotes for magazines or for advertising campaigns for many, many years. And I see this as just the next step. But because it's new, it feels very scary, and it's a very grey area to be in. As the leaders in the field of nutrition, dietitians have always done this kind of work and been paid for it in some way. Social media brings us more opportunities to do this. And there are so many unregulated influencers and celebrities working with food brands that if we don't step in and start doing something, we're going to be overrun with the unqualified people giving the information, and because of their numbers of followers and because of the brand, their messages are going to get out there. The key, I think, to working with a brand on Instagram is to always be, well, not just Instagram, on social media, is to always be evidence-based. So to question the brand about their text and to not be afraid of that. It might mean that you lose the work, but at least you know that you have been credible and that you've been ethical about the way you've done something. Many brands will welcome your advice and will actually take it on board and will make some changes. And if they don't, then maybe it's not the right brand to be working with. When the evidence is not there, so I get approached by many, many brands who would like me to work with them and there is no evidence, then that's where we need to step in and say, well, actually, you can't make a claim like that. And it's important to not just say no to the work, but to actually educate that brand as to why and as to maybe what they need to do differently. I think our transparency is important as well. So it's important to always declare the type of work that you're doing and to try not to bury that somewhere in the text. And if you're unsure at all, then to always ask another dietitian or someone to check out your post and to not worry about that. So I do that all the time. There'll be a couple of dietitians who can tell you that I'll quite often message them and say, is this okay? I'm not sure. Our role is to share the correct information in a clear manner. So there is some guidance that we can always look at. So we've got the Advertising Standards Agency who have got some guidance. They've got the CAP code, which is kind of the rule book on things. And they talk about marketing communications being legal, decent, honest and truthful, which is something that we would always want to do. That marketing must be easily identifiable, so using the hashtag ad, and be accurate about the brand. Again, that's something we would do. And if you're paid by a brand in any way and asked to write about it, then you must always put hashtag ad in as well. So gone are the days of dietitians not being able to work with a brand or having to only recommend a single product, but we still have a huge responsibility to make sure that we are sharing the right information and that we are being really sensible about it, but also knowing that our evidence base only goes so far. So sometimes we have to use our scientific knowledge in order to take things a little bit further. There can be some lovely work in this field, so creating recipes, sharing top nutrition tips, helping a brand be responsible about their product, and often these people need our support, they need our guidance. So rather than seeing advertising work as being really negative and just about somebody getting money or getting exposure, I see it the other way. I think it's about somebody trying to encourage a brand to be responsible about the things that they're trying to share. We've also got information from the Hcpc about working with brands. So they tell us to always work within the Advertising Standards Agency guidelines and marking things with that hashtag ad. And they're not anti us working with brands, and there seems to be a thought that the Hcpc are the baddies and they're going to, get cross about it, but actually they're not. And any queries, you can go to them directly about a post and ask them. So always, again, be willing to ask and check something out. As long as we work within the evidence base and are able to back up what we say, then we should be okay. And being honest and open is also the key. Being willing to explain where you got your information from or where you got your views from is really important. The Hcpc actually promotes the use of social media as long as we are maintaining boundaries and confidentiality and we are not misleading the public. So those are some of my thoughts on our profession and our role in terms of the media and social media. And I would really love to see dietitians pushing themselves out there, engaging together and showing that team approach, showing how we are all good friends, we do all support each other, and that we are kind, that we are ethical, that we are creative, that we are innovative, that we are evidence-based, and we are not those boring old people in white coats walking around a hospital. I would love to connect with anybody who is interested in talking about this further, so please do go and find me over on my social media channels. So if you look for Priya Tew, you should find me. Come and have a chat. I really hope you've enjoyed this talk and I look forward to any of your questions either now or later on. Thank you so much.